Welcome to Stories from Sight, the renovation podcast that digs a little deeper. I'm Amy Dornalick, and together with my co-host Jane Middlehurst, we peek behind the curtains of those Insta-worthy interiors to bring you the real processes people went through to make their dream homes a reality. This week we speak to Camilla, whose renovation journey started during lockdown, when she and her husband realised they needed more space for their growing family. After an initial dream of finding a period property, they fell in love with the 1960s project, which needed a complete renovation. We talked to her about envisioning her finished project and her process of project managing the works with her contractor to bring it to fruition. So, Camilla, great to have you with us today. And I was wondering if we can start at the beginning of your renovation journey, and maybe if you could talk to us about what prompted you to move and start this project.
So probably like a lot of people, it was lockdown and being stuck in a small terraced house in London with a very small baby and a very small garden. And I think after that first 15, 16 weeks of very, very intense lockdown, where my husband and I were both working from home, our toddler's childminder had closed. So we were trying to juggle all of that. My husband was also in the high risk group, so he was shielding and basically not going out of the house. And we just realized how important having more space was going to be for us. I think also we both have jobs in London and had never had the opportunity to work from home more than, say, once a week. So the liberation that COVID gave us proved to our industries that we could work really efficiently and effectively from home, actually made us realize we could leave London and the commute wasn't going to be such a barrier as it had been previously.
So what were you looking for? It's a place that had lots of space, obviously, but I remember you saying that maybe your criteria changed quite quickly when you started looking.
So I grew up in Tudor and Elizabethan houses. I grew up on the border of Essex and Suffolk, which is a real comfortable country, beautiful architecture, very, very old. And so that was always on our kind of dream wish list. And we started looking around quite a few houses. My husband's 6'2", and I'm quite tall as well. And we quickly realized how every room was sort of low and big beams that he was just going to whack his head on constantly. And also really small separate rooms. And actually we realized quite quickly that for the kind of life that we wanted to be able to have that free-flowing living, which we perhaps weren't going to get in a period property. And we came across this 1960s really, really ugly house, which had great land, and it was on the edge of a village, so we'd be able to walk to a pub and a shop. So we weren't feeling completely isolated, particularly having come from London where we had everything on our doorstep. And we just kept seeing it on Rightmove, but kind of kept ignoring it. And we just randomly thought, let's just go and see this really ugly 1960s house. And that was partly inspired by a woman on Instagram who had just done up her really ugly 1960s house. And she'd put beautiful boarding on it and used loads of concrete, and it just looked amazing. So we walked into the house that we're now in, and the couple that were living there were in their 70s, 80s, and they were shielding, so they wouldn't actually let us in the house. So we just walked around the garden, and within 3 minutes I was in tears. I was literally crying in the garden. I just knew this was going to be our home and this was going to be our project. And so we put an offer on the house without even going inside it. I also cried the day we moved in, sitting in this horrific sort of early 90s kitchen with green lino floor, which we later found out had asbestos in it, and just sobbing and saying to my husband, what have we done? This is so bad. But I don't feel like that now, thankfully.
And did your husband, did he also kind of catch the vision immediately, or did he take a bit more time?
He took a little bit more time. So I was, 3:00 in the morning pinning things on my Pinterest board. And then the next day I would take the best of the best and I would create mood boards for him to show him, right, this is what the outside could look like. This is what the inside flow could look like. This is what our kitchen could look like. even to the point where I was having to sort of, I'm no graphic designer, but I was having to sort of in PowerPoint cut out a door from one place and cladding from another to put them together to show that it could look good. And I think he probably put quite a lot of trust in me and this one Instagram account that I'd seen of this woman who'd done something similar. He's a very visual person, so I had to show him things to prove that it would work.
I've just got this really amazing picture of you kind of revealing your latest mood board. Ta-da!
I literally would go A, B, or C. So because he also he has to feel like he's part of the decision-making process.
Right.
So even though I knew we have to go for route A, I had to present him with various routes and make them slightly less attractive. Make sure but again, that's just the industry I'm in. You always have to show more than one option, even though there's only ever one choice to go with.
I was just thinking that feeling of you arriving in the house as existing. It was just like you've been living in the mood board for so long and convincing yourself of this place that I guess it was a shock to arrive in the existing. And was the upset just realizing the task ahead?
Yeah, it was really overwhelming. And to be honest, we've lived with that pressure for a few years. And until we'd found an architect, and then particularly until we found a really good construction company, that pressure was it. We've put all our savings into here and a horrifically big mortgage. If this didn't work out and it didn't meet the vision that we had in our minds, we were just going to be stuck with a really ugly house,
Like the stakes were high.
Yeah, stakes were high.
So tell us a little bit about that journey from arriving to getting the project moving and how that happened.
So originally we thought, as soon as we had exchanged on the property, let's just get going. But actually after a while, we decided that we wanted to live in it and really understand what rooms we use the most and what frustrates us the most and what views are we enjoying or what views do we feel we're missing. So we ended up having about a year and a half in the house, just kind of enjoying it and getting used to the green lino floor and the 1990s kitchen and avocado suite. And that was a really good decision because we realized that some of the ideas that we perhaps had before we moved in weren't actually how we were going to end up using the property and using the space.
Were you the person sketching out ideas over your right move plans, or had you engaged an architect by this point?
So we knew that the flow of the house wasn't right, but neither of us could put our finger on why it wasn't working. So we knew we needed an architect. We looked at and met several, but the person we chose, we felt like she had done renovations of this age property before. And the output that she had created was modern, which is what we wanted. And she came around the space, obviously, and we had a really good chat with her. I shared all my mood boards with her and spent ages using words to describe how I wanted to feel when we walked in the house, as well as words to describe how we wanted it to be when we were socializing or how we wanted it to be when we were just with family. So I think it was really important for her to sort of be brought in on the journey of how we live. So we did that. And she instantly came back with a change, which was changing the position of the front door, which seems like a really small thing, but hadn't crossed our mind whatsoever. And that one change meant everything flowed better. And she just got it instantly. So there were a few changes back and forth, but very, very minor tweaks. But really, what she came back with initially was pretty much what we went with.
Well, that's really nice, like the unlocking of the space. And so once you had this plan in your hand, were you raring to go to get started? I assume that the materials and the technical detailing were quite important to you. How did that happen?
Yeah, we were really inspired by the materials within the village. So we live on the border of Essex and Suffolk. It's a really, really pretty village. Loads of flint in Suffolk and lots of black clad barns. We wanted the house to sort of blend into its more agricultural environment. And you walk along the fields, which you can get to from a gate at the bottom of the garden. And there's, piles of flint where the farmers have dug it up. And very sadly, budgets meant that we couldn't go with the flint because it was just so expensive. And the council actually refused our application to have black clad timber because they said that there was absolutely no existence of it in the area. And 2 doors down, there's a house that is completely black clad, which just shows you how backwards the planning process is.
Yeah.
It was as if she'd never driven in the village whatsoever. And we put in the application all these other houses within a sort of 200-meter radius from us that had black cladding, but they wouldn't accept it, which I think is a real shame. But in retrospect, it saved us lots of money because we weren't having to either stay in the wood or burn it. But it's not quite the aesthetic we were originally going for, but that's just one of the compromises we had to make.
It's really frustrating when you've got such a great vision and the planners, for whatever reason, can't see it.
Yeah, although it is interesting because the very, very first picture that I pinned on my very first board was a house that was bottom half black painted, top half silvered, untreated cladding. And I think it was probably my husband that went, oh, I think we should have black cladding because it exists in the village and it's a bit more barn-like and I really want flint, which I totally bought in on. But ironically, the house that we've ended up now looks exactly like the one that was the very first picture I pinned. So, we're very, very happy. There's no complaining. And then your question about were you raring to go and just want to do it? Shortly after we got planning permission, I then found out I was pregnant. So that was a bit of a hiccup that we hadn't sort of really expected. I spent ages, and I mean weeks, writing our scope of work because our architect had got us through planning and had been clear that she didn't want to be involved after that. So I had to sort of learn through HomeNotes, thank goodness for HomeNotes, what needs to be included in a tender process. And I also come from an industry where I have written scope of works and fee proposals and things like that. So I had a general sense of what needed to be included. I probably went a bit OTT on detail. Everything from I want a 1 meter 40 by 2 meter matting at the front door. I was very, very specific about everything, which was one of my main frustrations, that no one else had read the scope of work like I had. But it also meant that our cost estimate was probably really accurate because I'd been so anally specific about everything we wanted.
That's incredible. Yeah. How was that received? I'm interested to know, like, for the different contractors who you sent that out to, what was their reaction to receiving the scope of works?
So we sent out the tender to 6 different builders. We were in this sort of halfway house where we were probably a bit too big for local builders, but probably a little bit too small for big contractors. Our budget was about 200,000, a little bit more. So the local contractors received the scope of work and just went, oh, no, this is far too sort of professional and on the face of it complicated. So they all backed out. So then we ended up with 2 contractors who had availability and were willing to tender. We ended up going with the building contractor that our architect had recommended. And we felt safe going with them because she'd recommended them and had known them for a long time. It gave us an initial foundation of trust that maybe we wouldn't have had with another contractor who were completely unknown to us.
And so going into this, did you know that you were going to have to project manage directly with the builder? And were you ready for that?
Yeah, I knew that my husband and I would have to project manage it. Again, the industry that I'm in, I have to oversee quite complex creation of things. I work in advertising. I've made TV ads for years, big budget TV ads, which is nothing like building a house, but at least the understanding of the need to communicate and find the way of efficiently and effectively communicating. And I think that was a really big learning for us. I come from an industry where everything's done over email and even text message, and phone is usually not used as much and certainly not face-to-face anymore. Whereas builders, I was sending long emails of things that we'd noticed on site that needed tweaking, and I just wouldn't get any response. And actually, I quickly realized that we needed to just go down there or pick up the phone and chat to them. And the best time to do that was at about 7 o'clock in the morning whilst they were travelling to site, so that it was fresh. And also they really respond to being fed. So I would often come down pretty much every week with donuts or a big bowl of fruit. For Christmas, we gave every builder a bottle of whiskey to say thank you for their hard work. And actually, I think they were really taken aback. I don't think people often said to them, thank you, really appreciate the hard work that you're doing.
It does make a big difference.
Yeah, it does.
Can I just ask, sorry, on a slightly technical thing? So you've got these drawings that were planning drawings, and you've got a very detailed schedule of works, which is obviously a written document. There's a bit of a gap there in terms of the kind of technical drawings where you draw out everything that you want to happen. How did you bridge that gap, and how did you communicate to your contractors exactly what needed to happen?
So we had a really good structural engineer, and that helped a lot. And he wrote very, very detailed drawings for us. And he actually came back a couple of times when our builders had questions and just met directly with the builders. So there were times where us and the site foreman, we just made decisions on site. So we would get the tape measure out, we would plonk a brick here, plonk a brick there, see how it felt. And we would just make a decision on dimensions and things like that, which maybe was a bit haphazard. But at the same time, trusting a drawing is not the same as being in the space and going, actually, that wall doesn't work there. It does need to be a foot further in, so we've got more space on the other side or whatever it is. So for us, having that flexibility worked, which is not going to be right for everyone. And when we were having those site meetings, I was the one who started writing notes, but I ended up getting Ben to write the notes because I was doing all the talking. And we still would have to email the summary of the items that we had discussed almost on a daily basis to cover our back. And the days where we have forgotten to do that are even today biting us on the bum. So, for instance, we've had underfloor heating throughout the downstairs of the house, apart from in 2 rooms, my office and a sitting room. And I know we agreed to put the radiators in these 2 rooms on a separate system to the radiators upstairs, so that I could have the radiator on in my office in the afternoon when it's cold. And because I didn't put it in writing, I've got no proof that that was something that we agreed to do on site. And it's only one little thing that I failed to do, but the impact of me is that I'm having to sit here with an electric blanket on because it's really cold, because I can't turn the heating on just in this room, because otherwise it will turn the heating on in the whole rest of the house.
That just shows how important those site meeting notes are.
I think the biggest learning from this is that there are always going to be things that are going to go wrong, and it's not the things that you expect. It'll be something completely different, and you can't let that wind you up. It's just part of the process, and you've got to try and enjoy the process of what it is. You're creating something new that you're shaping and having a lasting impact on the future. I think we were really lucky that our builders were incredible. They were really, really good. And the number of times I would come on site and say to our foreman, oh, I've noticed this, this, and this. And he would say, don't worry, I'm already on it. And I talked to the guys about it yesterday. And I had every confidence that he was spotting little things that we hadn't. So having that trust in that one person for us was key in delivering the project smoothly.
Yeah. And can I ask you, when you say you have to enjoy the process, do you feel like you succeeded in doing that?
I enjoyed the process. I think my husband wouldn't agree. He would get very wound up, which is funny because there's always this sort of saying that he's far more laid back than me. But when it got to something as big and as stressful as this, for some reason, I was far more relaxed. I think I just always had faith in the process and that it was going to happen, and what would be would be. I think you do need someone to be the calm one and someone to be the one to put a hot rod under them. Yeah. It did work having that kind of good cop, bad cop.
And were you good cop, just to be clear in this?
Oh, well, I guess it depends. I mean,
you were bringing the cookies and stuff, but you were definitely
I was bringing the cookies, And everyone on site knew that the final decision was with me. And that's only because got a really good attention to detail, which my husband doesn't. He's a big thinker. He would have the awkward discussion. So if I had questioned something and the builders had kind of gone, no, don't worry about it, but I knew deep down it wasn't right and I wasn't being listened to, I'm afraid I did get the man to try and sort it out. I have to say, these last 9 months, I have not experienced as much sexism as I have. I've had electricians phone my husband instead of me, despite the fact I'm the one who has sent the email with the question. I've just been ignored and they've gone to him and he's answered the phone and gone, I haven't got a clue. Talk to my wife. She's the one who contacted you. She's the one who's got the detail.
It's still definitely rife in the industry. And I think, we've definitely experienced it as female architects, which we don't talk about it very often, but it's definitely prevalent.
Yeah, well, it kind of changes the way that you act on site. And I think it's only recently that I've really realized that we have to approach things in a very subservient way, which is upsetting sometimes, that you kind of feel like you have to work around egos and make sure that you're not coming across aggressive or that, you're not trying to play that you know better.
And the moment my husband would arrive on site, they'd all be going, all right, lad, all right, boy. And I ended up having to say to him, listen, when you go down on site and you get all like, all right, mate, how you doing? I instantly feel out of the group and I instantly feel like I'm not part of the process. And he actually was great and was like, I hear you. I recognize that. I'm really sorry. And he, it didn't happen again. But it was amazing. And he was doing that to get the best out of them in the way that he knew, right? Yeah. So it wasn't him sort of being consciously sexist, but that was the result of it. And I was having all of these conversations with a 5, 6, 7-week-old baby strapped to me.
Yeah.
So I was walking around site going, that wall should not be there. You put that in the wrong place, with a baby strapped to me. And you could see them kind of going, this woman should not be on site. But that was the only way I was going to get, things done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I couldn't leave the baby on her own. So,
And you were living with your in-laws, was that right? Or your parents?
So we moved out when our baby was 5 weeks old. And it was also the first week of summer holidays. So school for our eldest had stopped. So we spent the summer basically sofa surfing across various family members who lived in Norfolk and lived in Devon. We then, from September, when school started and when work really started to ramp up at the house, we decided to rent an Airbnb in a next door village. But they had various prior bookings. So, every few weeks we had to pack up the whole thing and move to my parents' house for like 4 or 5 days. Wow. So we were literally living out of a suitcase with 2 children, one of whom was a newborn, for 5 months. Which was very, very stressful. Yeah. But we couldn't live on site and we couldn't afford to pay rent for somewhere consistently for 5 or 6 months. We managed to find a building contractor who was willing to do it within 5 months. The other contractors were coming back and they'd said 10, 11 months. And we couldn't actually find anywhere to rent for that sort of short period of time either. So suitcases and sofa surfing it was.
And did they manage it in the 5 months?
They got the bulk of it done within 5 months. We were late moving back in by about a month and a half, I think. And there was no floor. There was no toilet downstairs. But there was enough for us to get by. And then they finished it when we were living here, which the moment we moved in, everything slowed down and ground to a halt. And it was almost like the first 90% of the job took 50% of the time. And then the last 10% of the job has taken the other 50% of the time, which has been so frustrating.
It's so common. I mean, we see it all the time, don't we, Jane? I mean, and you feel like, of course, they can work around you, but I think just mentally, it's like, oh, it's done. even if they know it's not done.
It's like that deadline somehow switches to never ending. There isn't a fixed point at which you're saying we need this finished by anymore, which is just like ASAP, obviously.
Yeah, so we moved in November. So we're looking at 4 months since we moved in. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, okay, maybe not 50-50, but it's 60-40 in terms of timings.
If you could go back and redo any part, is there anything that jumps out at you that you think, oh, I would have done that differently?
There's definitely design choices that we've made that I regret, but I don't regret the process. And I think we were really, really lucky with our architect's vision and the builders that we found. We really trusted them. And I think if you haven't got that trust with the builder, it would have been a very, very different, very painful and probably quite upsetting process. But we really trusted them to get the job done. We were discussing it ahead of this podcast, what things would we have changed? And we know exactly what we would have changed. But we both said, well, we'll do that next time. So this definitely hasn't scarred us enough to not do this again. I almost feel like this was maybe our practice, but who knows?
And how is it now being in your space and, thinking back to those Pinterest boards?
It's so worth it. I come downstairs because we've only really done the downstairs. We've done the bathrooms upstairs, but the upstairs is still very much firmly stuck in the 1960s. So I walk downstairs in the morning and I honestly feel like I'm living in my dream home. I didn't really realize that I would feel like this, that it would actually look like my Pinterest board and look like the vision that was in my head. And it's just wonderful. Really, really wonderful.
Oh, well done. I think part of that success is to your skill set and just enabling you to get that vision made. I mean, kudos to you.
Who knows? But it's just brilliant. I love the fact that no one else will notice the things that excite me as well. Like this little bit of cornering on our kitchen and how I measured meticulously the edge of one of our kitchen units. So I knew it would slot right next to the framing around the door. And I haven't lost a single millimeter of storage space. Tiny little things like that no one else would notice, but that make me quietly happy.
That's brilliant. Getting every ounce out of the project is really an amazing feeling.
If you'd like to see Camilla's 1960s village dream, then head over to our website at homenotes.co/stories from site, where we have photos of the finished project. As we're coming to the end of this series, we also wanted to let you know that we'll be running our very popular guided version of our Getting Started course in September to help you make a plan for your project. What does that mean? Rather than doing our course on your own, over several live sessions, we take a group of you through the course content together so that you can ask us questions, meet other home renovators and share experiences, as well as get the motivation and accountability to make a plan for your works and get your project finally started. We love doing these live sessions and throw lots of extra content and support in there so that you can get the very most out of the course. So if that sounds good to you, then sign up to the waitlist in the show notes below and you'll get notified when tickets go on sale later this summer. That's all from us for now. Join us next week where we'll be reviewing this series and discussing our favourite takeaways and top tips. See you then.